Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. I hope everyone's not too discommoded that we're on a Thursday instead of a Wednesday this week, because we had the awards of our future makers yesterday, and some beautiful innovative work was there for us all to see, and well done to all of the people who received awards and everyone who entered. And leading on from that, entering competitions is an extremely important element of your work that you should always keep an eye on, and we will touch on it today. We're here today, and I think it'll be really exciting that we're dealing with the collector end of the market. I have a passionate interest in the collector end of the market, and it's really lovely as we come up to the 60th webinar since we started in March, that we're able to have a conversation this afternoon about this extremely important area, because all of you who as makers, whether you're self-taught or when you came through college, there was always a collectible work that you aspired to. And I think these influences stay with us throughout our lives, and then you may want to become the type of person whose work is collected by collectors. So we're going to have a discussion this afternoon on aspects that you should look at when you're approaching this area. So I'm really honored this afternoon to have a wonderful three persons with me who, I'm actually humbled, and I hope I can keep up with their knowledge. So we have Brenda Mc Parland. Brenda is a curator, and she curates in visual art, but she also has curated a number of high-end craft projects. She's going to lead us off on the discussion and talk about those experiences. We then have Clive Fiddis. Clive is a ceramicist. He has a wealth of experience in curatorial work. He's going to touch on exhibitions such as Collect, and possibly, if we've time, you look at Design Miami and other exhibitions that some of you may be considering. And then finally, I have the Tour de France, or the Tour de Force even, of Noel Kelly. I'm sure a number of you know Noel Kelly, and I'm delighted that Noel's able to be with us this afternoon. Noel is the director and chief executive of Visual Artists Ireland. So with this experience in front of me, I hope that I can be quiet most of the afternoon and just relay your questions, because I'm not going to in any way challenge their experience or their knowledge. So listen, we have a really interesting afternoon ahead of us, and we have a large group of you assembled. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Brenda. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you very much, Emer. Lovely to be here, and welcome everyone. Well, I'm just going to start briefly to start off tell you about my career. I studied history of art and architecture with Emer actually, and modern English in Trinity College in Dublin. And I followed this with a postgraduate diploma in arts administration in the City University in Barbican in London. And from that, I did a placement in Air Gallery, which was a very formative experience. I was given a lot of projects to run, touring exhibitions and really interesting projects with great people. And this led to my first job in a commercial gallery, Nigel Greenwood Gallery in London. He had one ceramicist on his books. The rest were fine artists, paintings, painters, sculptors, and people like Charles Saatchi used to buy from him regularly. And Nigel Greenwood, he was someone who created the Hayward Annual, and he was a very dynamic gallerist, and sadly he's not with us any longer. But I then went from that commercial experience to a public sector gallery, Artsite Gallery in Bath. And there we had a UK programme and one international exhibition a year. The gallery was a small domestic basement really of a Georgian building with a sculpture garden and a crafts case. So we programmed contemporary craft from the UK on an all year round basis as well, and sold some craft from there, which was very exciting. And in tandem with that, there was the commercial Bath Contemporary Art Fair. So we ran that with 40 galleries, all UK, and it was pretty full on times, but I learned a lot on the job. I became the director there eventually, actually, after a couple of years. But I was still drawn to the excitement of London. So I returned to London to the Business Design Centre, where I had a lot of contact with design and craft as well. But my role there was to run art fairs. So I ran commercial gallery art fairs, 80 of the top galleries like Waddington's and top galleries, in the most expensive art fair in Europe, as I was told every time. It was like a sales job as well as a bit of marketing, a bit of art. And we also initiated Fresh Art, which was 40 artists, 40 colleges with art colleges. And that was funded by the Business Design Centre. So that was like we were giving back by promoting the students, the graduates. And that also was a selling exhibition and included some contemporary craft. Following on from this, in 1993 to 2003, I was senior curator, head of exhibitions at IMA, the Irish Museum of Modern Art. And I ran the temporary exhibitions program there, which was very busy. And while I was there, we initiated and developed new projects. We did Irish and international exhibition programs, established a strand for emerging artists, developed the artist studios and refurbished them and set up a program there so that artists could be present and the process could be visible to audiences. And we also set up the IMA Glen Dimplex Artists Award, which was a prize based on the Turner Prize to support visual artists and show their work in a shortlist exhibition, which I ran every year. And the IMA Nissan Art Project, which was a public art project, which was a very ambitious project with projects running with budgets of 100 grand. And Dorothy Cross Ghost Ship, which was in Dunleary, Scotsman's Bay, illuminated decommissioned ghost ship was one of them. Fran Hegarty and Andrew Stone's For Dublin, which was a neon prose poetry by Joyce on significant key buildings in the city centre and the Liffey. And the third one, we ran 3 and they ran over probably about 6 years. Down Shipsides was a bamboo support where the artist, we shipped in a significant amount of bamboo from Hong Kong and a scaffold was made on the Carlton building on O'Connell Street. And this was like a nod to the Celtic tiger and different worlds and markets and property industry at the time. We also set up and refurbished the new galleries, which I subsequently went on to program with different kind of exhibitions as well. And I would say, just summing up very briefly, exhibition highlights of that I would consider my highlights were of Irish artists were Willie Doherty, Kathy Prendergast, Kieran Lennon, Phelim Egan, Louis Librocky, Nigel Rolfe, just to name a few. And on the international list of artists, I would some other highlights were Janine Antoni, Juan Munoz, Sol Lewitt, Rebecca Horn, Kiki Smith, Ilya and Emilia Kabakov. And my last exhibition there was Louise Bourgeois. And that was an interesting collaboration with the curator, Frances Morris, who's now the director of Tate Modern, who knew Louise Bourgeois very well. And that was my way into reaching her. She was in her 90s when we did this show, and she was very frail and she was working at home just on her kitchen table on a domestic scale and with sewing torsos and heads and little tiny figures as well as a little bit larger, but it's sort of back to craft and back to her roots. Her parents were tapestry makers in France, back to her youth. So it's interesting. And really most of the pieces in that show were sewn and knitted works. I was also involved in the acquisitions committee. So we were building a collection at the time with IMA from nothing. And that was very much linked to the exhibitions program. And we also accepted donations. So every time there was a contemporary exhibition, we would try and purchase a piece from that. But the board were involved in those decisions as well, obviously. And alongside all the exhibitions, I was working with the collections curator and the education community and marketing people as well. And I'd just like to say that I'd like to acknowledge the importance of mentors to me in my career. And I think it all started off with Patrick Murphy in Dublin, who, when I was in Trinity, I volunteered in the Douglas Hyde Gallery, and he's now the director of the RHA Galleries. And he's still sort of a touching someone I would go back to ask advice occasionally. Every couple of years, I seem to end up having a conversation with him. He's always been a great advocate and supporter. And Ivana Blazovic was a very dynamic curator. She's now the director of the Whitechapel Art Gallery. I got to know her when I was a student in London, and she let me run projects all by myself and just taught me how to proofread documents and all sorts of skills. Nigel Greenwood was a total perfectionist and a list maker, and nothing was ever, he was very ambitious, and I learned a lot from him. And Sean Kelly, who was in Bath, taught me a lot of skills as well. And on the international stage, he now runs his own gallery in New York, a big empire with artists like Rebecca Horn, Marina Abramovich, and Lorna Simpson. And then, of course, Declan McGonigal, the former director of IMA and NCAD. For 10 years, we worked alongside each other as a really dynamic team. Where I thought he was very dynamic, and he was very supportive, and he gave me a lot of freedom as well. But just to say, like, you can't do all of these things on your own. Your success is always, you're surrounded by good colleagues and mentors at every stage. So just moving on then, I'm now working as an independent curator. I took a career break and raised my family. I have 3 girls who are all on their own careers now, one at school, 2 in university. And at some point when I was trying to get back into working, there were very few opportunities at the time, and it was quite frustrating. But when I was ready to curate again, I just got the confidence up, and I thought I'll just make a dash for it. And I went for some open calls, and 3 came all at once. So I sort of launched back into curating by applying for open calls, some commissions. I won a commission to curate, amongst other things, my own title, but Felicity Clear and Helen Hughes, and that was in the Lexicon Gallery in Dún Laoghaire, and worked as a collaborative team. I was the curator, and the 2 artists wanted to work together and show bodies of work. They'd never worked together before, so it was a new idea, and it was a very successful exhibition, and we did a really interesting program of talks and workshops alongside that. I also was invited to curate a Present for Art project, and it's a permanent piece in the Gael Skull in Greystones, where I live. And I invited 2 other curators to come with me and come along on the selection panel with local schools, the board of management and the principal and a few other people. And Sam Keogh was finally chosen, a Wicklow-based artist, and he's done a beautiful vinyl floor which incorporates the children's drawings, like what is under the school. It was a new site, a new school, and it was an excavated site. So he asked all the children to think about what was under their feet, what was under the school. And they all brought their own images, which he compiled into a digital collage. He studied animation in the IADT, and he made a digital collage while he was on a residency in Amsterdam. And we made this beautiful floor, which is now in the foyer of the school. So the children walk over it every day on the way to the class, and they can admire their own art. And it's a very vibrant, colourful, fun project. And the third one that year was Aidan Barry. I applied for the Children's Art in Libraries. It was a Dublin City Council commission for libraries, and we eventually settled on Cabra Library, which had a very active readership and community that attend the library and are a very engaged audience. And Aidan Barry created an animation and origami colourful installation just in a room, but they allowed us to paint the room and make it like a little installation gallery space. And some great workshops were done there with origami with the artist Claire Halpin. And that was a great success too, and well attended for approximately about a month. Currently, I'm working as gallery producer in the Municipal Gallery in the Lexicon in Dún Laoghaire, and they run about 6 exhibitions a year. This year we have a craft exhibition. Last year there was a contemporary craft exhibition, and I'll talk about those in a moment. And I'm also the visual art expert to the Public Art Steering Group with Dún Laoghaire Rathdown County Council, and we're soon to launch a new emphasis on public art commissioning there, which is very exciting, very collaborative. And I'm also the curator of Solstice Art Centre in Navan, and we currently do about 5 exhibitions a year. At the moment, I have a show that has opened and closed, It's open again, and it's entitled New Era, with 4 Irish artists addressing the ideas of climate change in their practice. That's a Creative Ireland project, and it's again, visitors are back now, which is great. So just looking briefly at Unfolding, which is the title of the exhibition in Dún Laoghaire, in the Lexicon. This is an exhibition which is curated by Angela Kelly. So my role is to produce the exhibition and work alongside her and support her in presenting the exhibition and all the preparation and writing the press release and marketing it and liaising with the artist to a certain extent. And it reveals the process in the design and making process. And artists featuring in the show are Cathy Burke, Lorna Donlan, Trudy Feherty, Elaine Harrington, Pierce Healy, Alison Kay, Fiona Mulholland, Tara Ní Newlon, and Kate O'Kelly. And they all have a connection with Dún Laoghaire Rathdown. And the exhibition reveals their process. There are finished works, completed works, beautifully displayed, mostly in vitrines, some borrowed from the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, I believe. And they're beautifully presented, but they're also accompanied by process shots of the artist's hands, the artist's working processes, and texts and sketchbooks. So it makes it very accessible and very interesting to the audience. And in 2019, we had a beautiful exhibition, Taking Time, which was an appreciation of Irish craft. This was a collaboration, Orla Ross was the curator, and it was a collaboration with Creative Ireland, Men's Shed Network, and the Men's Shed were Ross, and there were several men, six to 10 men, I think, and they went around the country and they viewed a lot of craft work in studios and met a lot of artists, and they selected a show with her. They co-curated it with her, and they also did some workshops themselves with Heim Factor, and they made woodworks like chessboards and tables and turned wood. It was very beautiful. And artists that featured in that show were Emma Burke, Roisin de Butler, Conor Kelly, Heim Factor, Joe Hogan, Bernadette Madden, Jane Murtaugh, Liz Nilsson, Kate O'Kelly, One Strong Arm, Hannah Van Eist, and Sasha Sykes. So as you can see, quite a range with nature and poetry and the innate beauty of craft work. I think they had some themes going through the value of craft itself. So that's just a rundown on where I am at the moment. And to you makers, all I would say is just a few little tips. I would say be ambitious, set goals for yourself, have a big vision, set up a website if you can, use social media in a systematic way or a strategic way. I would advise you to have high resolution images that are ready and up to date so that you can send them to curators, available for press or collectors and gallerists, and using these for grant applications or bursaries, of course. Develop a mailing list of curators, collectors, or linking with other makers and collaborators. And think about the context that you'd like your work to be seen in. Would you like to be seen just with other makers, or would you like to go into other worlds of designer makers or artists, visual artists or musicians, or are there any people you can collaborate with, or what way would you like your work to be seen? And develop a few key mentors for yourself that you can go back and who will be advocates for you, who you can call on if you need a reference or if you need to just sound out an idea. And if you get stuck in your studio, someone to call. It could be a colleague, could be another maker, or could be someone in a different sector. And write clearly about your work. I think it's interesting for people when they're looking on websites, especially now when I'm researching. I can't go to too many studios. I can't really go anywhere, so I'm researching online a lot for the future. And Solstice currently have one of their shows online, so I'm currently online, constantly online, because of very little choice now at the moment. So how you project yourself and write about your work, you know, what inspires you, how you work, technical information, and write very clearly and very carefully about your work, because things could be lifted off your website and re-quoted anyway. So just be very concise and careful about what you write about. Don't be afraid to apply for open call opportunities such as the Golden Fleece Award, because your work can be seen then by lots. You don't know who, every panel changes every year, and it can be seen by different people, which can just unravel other opportunities for you. You know, for instance, in the Golden Fleece Award, it's open to visual arts and applied arts. So that's a nice different context possibly for your work to be seen in. And this year, the award has been increased to address the pandemic. The award is now €50,000, and they're going to be 5 separate awards of €10,000, which I think is a very positive thing. And look beyond Ireland, look into the UK, look into the USA, Europe for opportunities as well. And just 2 more little notes of things of interest, and that's me finished. Parity Studios in UCD have an artist in residence program, and I think it's really interesting that they invite artists, and it's a competitive process, but it's all about encouraging artists to work with different colleges. So College of Architecture and Engineering, College of Law and Social Sciences, College of Science, and others. And 2 makers, one recent and one current. Elle Harrington, is a ceramicist, has done a residency there. She's just completed it with the College of Science, which was very successful, I believe. I was talking to her. And Lorna Donlan is currently there. She's just begun a residency with UCD Conway Institute in biomolecular and biomedical research. And she's a weaver. You probably know her work, and she's also included in my show. But I think that's really interesting that makers are now included in that program. It's really inspirational. I think great work will come from that, and it's good for the future. And finally, this week I read about an initiative that perhaps some of you already know of, called Creative Futures Academy, which sees the NCAD, IADT and UCD and a range of other industry partners, including DCCI. And I think I just read about it, I'm not informed about it, but it seems to be supportive of graduates in the creative sector going forward from this crisis. So I think it's been set up hopefully to support young future makers. So that's all I have to say for the moment, and thank you very much for your time.
Brenda, thank you very much for kicking us off on that. And as I turn to the panel, we'll get into more meat later, but if I were a maker producing what I perceive to be high-end work, would one of the 3 of you like to direct me on how I should set my aspirations? When should I know to move? When should I not move? How do I decide where I should pitch myself and at what time?
There's a definite.
When do I decide to go to collect? There, we'll start off with that one.
I think if you're interested in this angle in the market, you must inform yourself by going to the international trade shows.
Yeah.
From Ireland, that would be London, it would be Collect, and probably PAD London, which is Pavilion of Art and Design. Most of the galleries dealing in work for crafts especially would be showing at those 2, and they're within reach without being too expensive. It's only a gallery show, so only galleries will take work there. It's a really interesting. I go every year just out of interest, but you do see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't go there thinking it's all wonderful, because it's not. There is some very unusual work. There's some very well-crafted work, and there is some absolutely exquisite work. The trick is knowing which is which, and maybe getting other people to agree with you. Interesting in the last couple of years, and I suppose it's for DCCI, if you hear a noise, by the way, it's my cat scratching the table leg. Scottish Crafts have started taking a selection of the best of Scotland to collect, and I would recommend DCCI to think about that. Individual artists and craftspeople can't go. It has to be a gallery. So the Scottish Crafts have started to promote the best of their craftspeople at Collect for the last number of years. And it's expensive. I think they took about 12 people last year. And in that way, you get exposure to galleries.
Okay, now the Design Crafts Council, my understanding is we ran such an initiative from about 2009 to 2011, but you know, we have to look at initiatives, I suppose, on a cyclical basis, and that was a kind of a best of Irish at Collect. And as you say, that's a great platform and opportunity. And I don't know, could we tease out the Collect Open a little bit? I've worked with people through mentoring who are looking at the Collect Open section, but I mean, I don't know, have you got comments?
I wouldn't mind just carrying on with that. Congratulations to the Future Makers, by the way, the people that won yesterday. I looked at it online and it was a terrific block of work and such a lovely opportunity to support developing makers. But I think DCCI needs to do for people who then become more established. I think Les Reed took people to America, to SOFA Chicago, but these people have now turned into elements like Joseph Walsh, for example, Joe Hogan, Sarah Flynn. They all started at that very first initial taking established artists out into an international market. And all of them have done very well with it afterwards. So Collect isn't the only aspect where I think Design Crafts Council of Ireland can actually support and help people. I think it's great at the beginning, but I think it needs to be that step on an international market. I think there's some opportunities there as well.
Okay, that's a really good point that I can.
Emer, could I step in just a little, because there's a couple of angles to it as well. I mean, my own background is very odd. My first job was Kilkenny Design Workshops. You know, one of the most fantastic projects ever to exist in the country, in my opinion. And it died a death, which was a horrible moment for a lot of people. And then, you know, I've been on the RDS, I've been chairing the RDS Arts and Crafts Committee, etc. So, you know, I've seen quite a wide range, and we see this in the visual arts as well. The very high level and high end fairs where you get noticed by the big buyers or the people that you would adore to get in front of. But when you travel around the country, you're actually meeting craft workers who basically have either different aspirations or, you know, maybe not ready for the big international fair. So I think it's important for people to do an amount of research to find out where to place their product. So really to sort of, you know, scavenge the internet, scavenge trade magazines to find out who is doing similar work or work that sort of like it can compare. And then, I mean, it's a kind of, not a trade secret, scavenge that individual or that company's CV and find out where are they at, and then start making a database of targets to make contact with, but making contact in a professional way. And I know that, Brenda, you touched on, you know, presenting yourself. You have to present yourself in a professional manner, but also being aware, you know, if your work is being influenced by, or your work, you know, has direct references, you know, being very upfront about it, you know, because how to differentiate yourself in the marketplace is, you know, you may get into a very niche area by differentiating yourself. And it's easier, you know, when you're trying to differentiate yourself on the big international collectors fairs, it can be actually really quite difficult.
I think, Brendan, that's a very good point. I think to actually know where people are by going to those shows first and trying to locate themselves where they are. Also, their work may not be good enough yet. It may be actually an aim to inspire them to improve as well.
I think the other thing, though, and Brenda, you touched on it as well, you know, the idea of talking about your work, statements, images, and things like that. You know, I mean, it's not a massive secret, but in the background, we're doing a lot of research in VAI on a platform similar to the platform that the Design and Crafts Council have. And it has been interesting talking to a mixture of people, you know, from venture capitalists in New York right through to software developers, etc., about what is this online thing, because, you know, not everybody is comfortable with this going online suddenly. Some people, you know, are already there and they're occupying a space, you know, making very valuable sales. Some people are not ready. But what has been interesting talking to each one of them, each one has said the same thing. Make sure that you have a quality product. Make sure that you talk very clearly about your product. Make sure that you understand your materials meticulously so that, you know, that's leading into sort of a level of quality and confidence. But most importantly, you have to build a relationship with the buyer or the collector through your screen. And the way that you do that is by being very clear and professional in your images, but also making the process of either contacting you or buying something through the online as simple as possible. The person who is buying something for €5,000 should find it as easy as as the person buying for €50. And you must be very transparent in all the processes that you have in place to build the confidence of the buyer that you are not a scam. And one of the very strong things that they said was Ireland has a lot going for it because Brand Ireland is respected in various, you know, communities around the world. But what Brand Ireland needs to do is, or the individual artist or craft worker needs to do, is they need to make fulfillment as simple and as efficient as possible, which is not something that was very obvious to us. But if somebody is buying something online in Amazon, they press a button, they know how much it's going to cost them, they know how much it's going to cost you shipping, and theoretically they know when it's going to arrive. That process needs to be in place for people who are actually developing online. And these are a lot of, you know, skills, but also there are a lot of organizations out there, you know, I mean, we're looking at an international fulfillment company called Arta. And Arta basically just do turnkey. Arta's in your website, you press a button, a quote comes invisibly from Arta, and the Arta arrives at your doorstep to take the work away from you and ship it. You know, so very simple things like that. The venture capitalists were saying to us, get that right, build the confidence, be transparent, and also show how you're giving back, you know, to the individual artist or craft worker. Then you are, because some of the figures we got was, I balked at this. In 2019, the online sales for our sector, so for the whole of the arts and craft and so on sector, was $4.8 billion. Now, out of that, 8% would have been in the area of decorative arts, but 8% of 4.82 billion, God alone, I mean, I'm not going to even try and do the figures. It's a huge market. It's dominated by large players, you know, Christie's, Sotheby's, all the big players are suddenly in there, but 17% of it is actually held strongly by niche. And they say that this niche is the area where the most development will happen. And that's what we would occupy, is that niche. So the market is huge and it's available, but it's up to us to try and find ways. And that's why the platform project that you guys have, you know, is a really great opportunity. But if people are thinking about their own websites, they should be thinking in these ways as well.
That's really interesting, because it's new, because historically what was happening, as we know, is for the larger collectible pieces, people weren't purchasing them unless they could physically stand in front of them. So is it being, and my colleague Kira Garvey was telling us about this recently, that backing you up, that this is a growing trend, and is it being given the gravitas of, say, Christie's or Bonhams or whatever, that when they come along and give it gravitas, is that giving the end collector the confidence?
But what they're saying is that the growth pattern for the online market had started to stabilize as it had matured, but COVID-19 has completely transformed it, so that about 80% of the current players in the market are looking to expand in the next, within the foreseeable future. Now, in terms of when you, like we talk about, I want to touch it, I want to feel it, I want, you know, so viewing rooms have been created for more 2D works. I think Ireland isn't quite ready, but it would be amazing if we could get ready. One of the developers that we were talking to, which deal with high-end e-commerce sites for the fine arts for really, really sort of high net worth clients, they were trying to convince us that actually 360 walk around of more sculptural and more object based is coming. Now, that's beyond the means of most of the people that we work with. But on the other side, you know, having a resource that would actually be able to feed into that. But even before getting to that stage, you know, the viewing rooms has transformed it and so on. So people's way of considering, you know, it's no longer that sort of, you know, you see something on eBay and you're worried that the thing that you see on eBay turns up, and it turns up and the neckline is actually down here rather than up here, and so on. So you have to, within your website, build the confidence that the person is actually buying what they see.
Okay, and if you be working through VAI on bringing that information to your clients?
Not yet, because actually you're the first people to know this project even exists, because it's a project we're working on with the department at the moment.
Okay, well, sorry, can I confidentially nap in on that one then? Being always want to get a craft seat, you know, if there is knowledge coming out of that for our, you know, gallery collector makers, it would be really wonderful to get together with you on that, because they're an extremely important group of our clients, but their information and their approach filters to everyone else. So, I mean, if we could do that, that would be absolutely superb. Yeah. And I think also I should give a plug for our wonderful portfolio initiative, developed and managed by my colleague Kira Garvey. I mean, that really keeps the standard up, and the torchlight, for want of a better word, going for this type of work. So, I mean, that is something that people should remember. And now that I've said that, and Noel, thank you very much. You can maybe come in later. Can I come back to you, Clive? And I'm going to put this to you, right? That I'm a maker who's producing high-end work, and I have been as part of a gallery to the show and collect in February, and I'm planning now to go to Design Miami. How do I shape myself to make that move on my own? What things do I need to do to add to my confidence and, you know, up my image and my approach?
I think Brendan touched on it, in that it may not be for everybody. You need to understand what the international market is. The collector's market isn't for every craftsperson or applied artist. I think you need to inform yourself. I love online stuff, but I really like being present as well. So if it is within reach, I would go to the London art shows. I was fortunate to go to the Loewe Worldcraft final exhibitions the last couple of years running. So you get to see a selection of a very broad spectrum of crafts at their best. And then you can measure your own work against it. Now, if you think you're not ready yet, at least it's inspiring to see what you have to do to improve your own work. And that has value in itself. I wouldn't suggest to anybody that they make their own personal venture to design Miami. It's horrendously expensive. I think you need gallery representation. But going to people like Collect, the same galleries will be in Design Miami as would be in Collect. So they do most of the world trade fairs for this kind of work. So Sarah Myerscough, for example, would do most of the wood or furniture base. She would probably, I don't want to put Sarah on the spot, but she would probably very succinctly give advice on people if they were ready or not ready for that. I know we have a very good furniture place in GMT, Letterfrac, fantastic support mechanisms, but not, this collector's world isn't for everybody. And I think gallery representation is the best. Now, all galleries are not good galleries. There are some galleries that earn their money and are fantastically good at supporting you. There are other galleries that are not so good. I could use other adjectives to describe them here. I'm sure you know what I mean. So have a look at the galleries and maybe talk to the people the galleries are representing to find out what they like. They're expensive. They take a big cut of the final sales. But if they've been in business for 10, 15, 25 years, they will have a certain reputation with buyers and collectors, which has a value of its own as well. We've been very fortunate, I think, in Loewe, in the Worldcraft Prize with Loewe. I think there's been an Irish finalist in the last 4 years. There was Sarah Flynn, there was Jack Doherty, Deirdre McLaughlin, and Joe Hogan. And nearly all of those people have come out of being recognized at international trade fairs represented by galleries, most of which was initially supported by DCCI, I think. So it's kind of a continuing journey that, having been at one of the galleries or being represented there, other galleries see your work and will offer you things. It's just getting your foot on that ladder if you choose that ladder's for you. For example, it's not for me. I would never touch it. My work wouldn't go there. So that wouldn't be an aim of mine to go. But if you think yours is, and you've researched it well enough, then I think to physically go to some of the shows first, and then to make representation to the galleries that you see there, that you think are appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a very clear path. And sometimes I find that galleries will be positive in their recommendation of your work to others. So, I mean, I would have instance of galleries in London recommending people to galleries in New York, etc. And once the bona fides is there, well, that's good, and I think it's worth pursuing. I have a note here from Sarah Flynn that she said, that she's lucky to have a wonderful relationship with a commercial gallery in London, and she feels that the relationship can be directly linked back to her participation in Collect with the Crafts Council for a few consecutive years, and that she believed that her commercial placing would not have happened without the Collect platform to be spotted. That's verifying exactly what you've been saying. And then on the counter side of that, and I think it's something that people should be aware of, is beware of gallery and media hype and try and see through it, because this person is saying that many high worth collectors are merely divesting But if they're divesting and their collection is appreciated by an affluent and discerning audience, that in its turn could be a benefit to makers.
Mhm.
So Noel, do you want to come in again on that?
Well, I think that the protecting yourself at all stages is vital, because, you know, across both the visual arts and the craft sector, there are unscrupulous people out there who will come with the most extraordinary opportunities that don't always turn out, or indeed even, you know, working with friends. You know, we all start as friends, and then, you know, misunderstandings. So one of the things, certainly in BAI, to all of our members that we say is that at every stage that you are working and, you know, developing a relationship, to actually ensure that you are documenting everything that is, you know, all the understandings that are being put in place, so that if you are getting to, whether or not it's you're exchanging letters of understanding or a contract, or if somebody doesn't have formal contracts, but to have a chronology all along. And also, very importantly, and we say this to visual artists, and they kind of laugh at us when we say it, but we say, and also keep an inventory of your stock and know where your stock is at all times, because it is very easy. We've had a very bad situation not so distant past, where a very, very affable gallerist was going around the country and getting a lot of work from a lot of artists, and then suddenly the work was sold, but there was no documentation that the inventory had ever been transferred, and the gallerist went out of business and subsequently died, and a whole lot of artists were significantly left out of pocket. But I would say that the other thing that we find interesting at the moment is the cross-disciplinary, and Brenda, you touched on it as well, looking at opportunities that may be for public collections or public commissions that are suitable for cross-disciplinary applications to be made. And certainly looking at things like the Percent for Arts schemes, although they do seem to be very much focused in on very specific art forms. What is making a lot of projects stand out is when people are actually able to work interdisciplinary, and seeing some quite dramatic, for example, collaborations between visual artists and glass workers, or, ceramicists and so on, being very, very successful. And I think that that's an avenue of, one, income generation, but as Brenda mentioned, the panelists, when you make an application for funding, there is a panel of experts going to see your work. So I can't reiterate enough, making applications and making the right application very well laid out. A secret that, well, not a secret, but a tip that we're giving as of 2 weeks in VAI is, the Word document application no longer works for most panels. People are coming in with well laid out, desktop published, using InDesign and all sorts of things, with amazing images and so on. And they're the applications that are actually standing out at a panel stage. So, make the application, because you never know who the panelist is, but make sure that you're showing your work in absolutely the best light.
That's really excellent, really excellent advice.
Oh, and can I just add in, all of us know the excuse, I don't talk about my work, or I let my work talk about itself, or, and let it speak for itself. And I want the audience to actually come up with their own narrative. Yeah, look, in principle, that's a wonderful esoteric idea, but the practical thing is having 500 words ready to go at any stage is really, really important, because it is the difference between grabbing somebody's attention, grabbing a panelist's attention, and not making even the shortlist.
Okay, so what I'm getting from you, and I think this is really good advice, is when you're making an application, that you make sure it's a very, very strong one, that you constantly have your 500 words ready to go, and that you have an ongoing inventory of your work.
Yeah, and can I just add one thing, because it's actually picking on what Clive talked about. You know, also, cold calling galleries is never a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, unless your work is sort of dramatically amazing, and you know people are about to faint at their desks by its magnificence. But get to know galleries, get to know gallery audiences, do research on who is their audience. Does your work fit within the context of what they sell? And also, if possible, attend some of their events. Because I've often heard, you know, a gallery director or, you know, person saying, why would I look at something? They haven't even had the courtesy to even find out what we do. So I'm more likely to look at something that actually directly references me than I am at something that just really is a scattergun approach and doesn't show any interest in me.
Exactly. Can I go back to this inventory of your work, me being the forensic nerd that I am? It's really important, because when I'm working with people who make batch production and they're on 30 days credit, and I say never ever ever touch sale or return unless you want to get into a spot that's a lost leader. Your work that you have, say, in 4 exhibitions, and I know a number of artists intimately, and it can happen because opportunities come at the last minute. People take work, they need to bring work here, there, and everywhere, and then they're sitting down going, I didn't get to photograph that property. Where the heck is my work from such and such and such and such? And so it's not a criticism, because I've seen it in practice, and it can happen with the most eminent artists. It just happens. So I think if we go away from this evening, and any of you have work out there, that you just sit this evening and say, where the heck is my work? Start your inventory from here, because that work is your cash at bank. You know, it's if you don't have a record of it, and I don't want to be nasty or critical, but you've nearly given it away. And it's really important that you say, going forward now, develop that inventory. And something I say, and I know it's easier to say than do, is that you try and get a good image of each of your pieces before it leaves the studio.
And I would also, Emer, can I just suggest also, don't be afraid to follow up like in 6 months' time and say to the person, like, I gave you this, I have no information that it's sold. Do you still have it? You know, I mean, it isn't just that you keep your inventory, but you actually monitor that it still exists, because and I can be corrected on this, but our understanding of the law is that when the work is sold, the buyer, having transferred money to the person who your agent, as it were, ownership is transferred. And you know, you don't have you have a complicated legal battle to then prove that in fact ownership is still with you. So you really do need to protect that.
You're absolutely correct. The license ownership, when you're dealing with the gallery, remains with you. But once they've sold it on to a third party, it becomes incredibly complex, and ownership is much more difficult to prove. So, and
the other role of the documentation, sorry for interrupting, but you just got me on something that we're all passionate about.
Tell me more.
The other thing I would also say of having proper documentation is to also, if it ever comes to an intellectual property or copyright dispute, about originality of work. And I know that we have seen that going through the craft awards in the RDS at some stage. We see it, you know, certainly in VAI, we on a regular basis would get queries about intellectual property where either a work has a significant reference to another work and so on. So having documentary evidence of your work is part of the evidence that you need to protect yourself also in intellectual property and copyright.
Well said, well said. Those are really good points. We have a couple of comments here, and I have someone in the audience who's not too fond of galleries. There are the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's like the good, the bad, and the ugly with shops and craft, bricks and mortar retail as well. And they're saying that the branding and the maker's outgoing personality are the more important than ever. And he's saying that he wouldn't necessarily waste time with a gallery. But I think if you've the gallery researched really well and you've checked their bona fides, there shouldn't be an issue, because we do need them. We do need them to promote quality work, and they do get traction. Okay.
Could I add something to that?
Yes.
Just to make sure that people know the gallery is actually in it to make money. They're a business. They may take up to 50% of the final selling price. And most good galleries will work with that, and most good galleries have been in business for a number of years. Normally, if they've been in business for a number of years and they're representing a group of artists for a length of time, that would almost add to their pedigree. It's not in a gallery's interest to really shortchange its artist clients, because that's its bread and butter.
And Clive, I'd add to that, a recommendation is don't undercut the gallery. You know, you're having a professional relationship with a professional organization who you want to treat you professionally. And the worst thing in the world is then that you either decide that you can undercut them if somebody comes directly to you. You know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with selling from the studio, as long as you can also understand that you should really redirect to where your work is retailing. Studio sales should be at the same level, unless, you know, there's a slight, you know, sort of difference because of a flaw or something like that that's in it. But I give you a live example. An artist who was with a gallery then decided to go on their own. They undercut every price that had ever been charged for their work in the galleries around the city of Dublin. So first of all, they had the celebrity sales. So they had a little bit of buoyancy in the middle. Then they started having sales. And not only did they undercut the galleries that had sold their work, they started undercutting themselves. So collectors who are looking for something that's actually going to potentially increase in value, the value was being totally undermined by the individual artists themselves, because they were giving such big discounts, obviously on the window, like we all know about gallery discounts. And also they were giving a significant amount of work out to charity auctions without any protection of their market price. So they completely undercut the gallery, then they undermine themselves. They are no longer in business.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Noel, Noel, someone has said here, it's kind of interesting, that the market's changing so rapidly, the galleries are in decline, and online studio visits are the strategy going forward. Would you like to discuss that?
It's a mix. Look, we just look at the news. Even yesterday, look at Debenhams. Look at all the names that we've great confidence in. The high street is in decline, and we know internationally it is a phenomenon that there is a difficulty in the retail market as the world transitions into whatever this new reality of online and so on. I think that the online was actually stagnant because, you know, Ireland wasn't really very fast on the uptake of it. Suddenly it has, but now we've all been forced into it. It will only work if we can build up the confidence, as I mentioned earlier, about quality. But I will share the title. I mean, if people can Google it, I will share the title of a report by Hiscox, who are the insurance company in our sector. The report is called the Online Art Trade Report for 2020. And whilst it shows, you know, a stagnation in growth, it is sort of showing broken down with, say, auction houses and people like that. It's starting to show what the trends they're seeing. What they seem to be projecting is that some of the bigger players will amalgamate. They'll get together for survival, but there will still be a role for niche. What I found interesting also, I've been kind of looking over the last few days at some of the places that when I worked in Kilkenny Design, I respected and see where they're still around, like, you know, like Heels and David Mellor and so on. And actually it's quite interesting to see that their business model has pretty much stayed the same, but that their online presence is totally conforming to their brand. So what I would say, the answer to my convoluted sort of like words just distilled is, online is here to stay. It is changing. There is definitely going to be more emphasis on it, and that people who have a product that can be shown to the best advantage online should be online, and those that don't have a product that's absolutely perfect for it maybe should get some advice from the Leos or whoever it is. You know, the Leos are very good around the country for giving digital going online advices and tokens. Get some advice from them if people feel that, oh well, I you know, I'm not quite suitable. There is advice to be got, and I would recommend that people do it. The voucher that you can get, and Emer, you might know this as well, it's €2,500.
Yeah, this is my beef. Yes, the Leos have a trading online voucher. If you've had one before, you can have it again, and they're subsidizing up to 90%. Okay, so you have to provide 10% of the figure now. And the Design Crafts Council, in conjunction with the Leos in the new year, is going to run a program called the e-commerce boot camp. And we're going to work with makers, no matter what your e-commerce capabilities at the moment, to develop you into a more commercially strategic approach. That's not necessarily diluting your product. It's just helping you to promote your product in a more effective manner. So those are things that are really important. And Noel, I'm delighted that you've brought it up. For the gallery oriented maker, can you please, everyone, put yourself onto mute, because I can hear the sound coming, echoing back. Thank you. For high-end makers in that market, all of the business strategy webinars that DCCI runs are also relevant. Now, from today and going forward, I'd like to look at other elements of high-end craft that we can focus in on to help support you. But all of the general business development, niche modeling and planning that we do is also relevant. So please don't forget about that. I have a comment from the audience, and I'd like to read it to you, and then maybe Brenda and Clive, you'd make comment. This person really believes that artists and craftspeople need galleries. We tend to focus on making the work, and we need galleries to sell and promote our work. I think that we need to think long term and not to spread ourselves too thinly. Any comments on that one?
Yep. I'm reading through some of the messages as well. Friends of mine that are selling through high-end galleries to an international market within this COVID period. Some of the international buyers aren't present in that city anyway. So online buying with the recommendation of the gallery is part of what's happening now anyway. So you do need the galleries because they will view the work online. An exhibition in London will be viewed by somebody in Japan, and they will talk to the gallery owner about the quality of the work and which pieces they should buy. So both is obviously in every tool we have in our box to sell work we should use. So yes, I think galleries are really important to use. Online is a really important tool. We should use that too. So I think all of it is useful.
So it's a mix. But I have here as well, in terms of buying online and the ease for a high value product, does it mean the end of POA?
What's POA?
I presume is that price? Do you mean price on request?
Price on application?
Yeah, price on request. Yeah.
Through galleries, no. Galleries will set a price for it. And if you're looking to have gallery representation, which will significantly increase the price of your work and continue to do that over a period of years, they may offer, the gallery may offer a 10% reduction if people are buying 2 or 3 pieces. But price on request, you can run that from your own website if you want. But I think Brendan's point about if a gallery represents you, do not undercut the gallery. That's a really unwise thing to do. Theoretically, you're supposed to put all of the work requests through the gallery. Now, the galleries don't mind if you do a little bit of your own. But generally speaking, if a gallery represents you and somebody approaches you, you direct them to the gallery.
And can I just talk about the POA just a little, because POA obviously in the visual arts sector is, you know, I mean, there's never a price on anything unless it's on Amazon or Etsy or whatever. And suddenly the big American gallery, big white cube galleries are showing the price. Because, and I've just shared the name of that report that people can Google, because when you go in there, you'll see people want it easy. You know, they want to, you know, yes, your object is precious. Yes, your object is high end, but they want to be able to make an easy sale, as well as the more complicated sales where you're developing more of a relationship and there's a lot of consideration. But the other person may be walking along and saying, no, actually, I want that, wants to press a button and wants it shipped. So if you know, it depends on the relationship you want with the buyer. Do you want a long sales cycle? Do you want a sales cycle that can be costly and, you know, maybe in the end not very successful? Or do you want to actually have quite an easy sales cycle, even if you're dealing at a high value item?
Okay, I have one last comment here, and then I'm going to ask my panelists for their closing comments. Okay, this person is saying, the times are changing, plan for drastic change. Brenda, would you like to talk about drastic change or change?
Change? Well, I'm a big fan of people going online. I'm also, I agree with Clive, a big fan of galleries, just to say that at the beginning. Change, I think the way public art is being commissioned is changing. And I noticed that Susan Mannion, who I happen to have had contact with recently in Oma, a local where I'm from originally, and so was she, we had a joint, you know, I supported her at an exhibition a few years ago. And she's a printmaker, and I noticed she's been awarded a public art percent for art commission. I think it's for school. And I think I just remember reading something, it was just popped up on my Facebook, about a ceramic or glass exterior, something that seemed to me for her going into a different area, and it was more in the craft and applied arts area, which I thought was interesting for Percent for Art, because it sounds like a large scale. It's in County Mayo somewhere from memory. Sorry to be a bit vague on that, but that's, I think more collaboration is generally, collaboration across the sectors and things like that are changing in a good way. So there might be more interest, you know, as well as sales, but I suppose the way people buy art and people are more at home. So from a commercial point of view, they probably are, times probably are changing, and some people are spending less money on other things. So they, you know, they might be inclined to buy some high-end craft online on a whim. I don't know.
Okay, Clive,
But
what do you think? Do you think things are changing?
For crafts and the sales of crafts, absolutely. We have a Loewe World Crafts Prize now, which is worth more than the Turner Prize is worth. So it's a significant amount of money for crafts. But when I was a student, which is now quite a long time ago, there was nothing like that at all. So yes, things are changing. Of course, things always change. I think it's relevant that in a increasingly online world, crafts are being more valued. I think there is a value in the crafts now as a made object against a background of increasing technology, or at least I hope so.
That's good. That's very positive.
Yeah.
Do you want to reinforce that positivity, Noel, before I let everyone go home?
Absolutely. I totally agree with Clive that the handmade, the contact with the maker is significantly increased in this environment that we're in. Is it totally changed? Maybe not totally, but I do think that what we are seeing an acceleration of online and so on. Is online for everybody? No. Simple as that. It's not for everybody, but those that can should take the opportunity. I would counsel very strongly. There are lots of online platforms. Do a lot of research beforehand. We have gone through quite a lot of the platforms to see whether or not we would partner with them, and the terms and conditions of some of them were just not, they did not have the interest of the artist at any stage of them. So research before you jump. Do some really, really basic research and get as much help and advice as possible. And you guys and Leo and so on are there and available.
So thank you very much, panelists today. Just remember all of that great advice and the fact that the bootcamp, the e-commerce bootcamp, will be starting in the new year. And of course, don't forget the wonderful portfolio initiative. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today, and I'd particularly like to thank our panelists for joining us. So with that, I'm going to call it a day, and thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.